Okay. Any abstentions? Okay. Moving on, the next portion of our meeting is our opportunity for community members to ask any questions or make any comments. We allot 30 minutes per our board policy for this entire session. Each person is given 3 minutes, and we ask you when you come to the podium to state your name and your address. Because there's so many people here tonight, we are going to be strict on the 3-minute rule. Nancy has a timer that she'll have up on the podium, so please keep track of the time. I will, at about 10 minutes, at about 10 seconds to that 3-minute mark, I will kind of give you a warning, and if you can please then just wrap up. We want to make sure that everybody who wants to speak has the opportunity to do so. So please try to keep your comments brief as possible.
In the intermediary, may I just interject something so before we get started with community comment? As this is a special Board of Education meeting, normally it's called for its specific reasons, which ours is for a capital construction project that's getting ready to move forward. We would normally not have community input at this point or questions. Given the tenor and the understanding of what is the lack of guidance that we have, we understand people may be coming out. Please understand that there is no dialogue back and forth. It's a comment time, and then ultimately the board will be having a discussion, as you know, on that reopening, and that is the board's time uninterrupted. So just lay that out, and we're trying to be mindful of everybody's concerns.
Okay, thank you. So with that, I'll open it up to the floor. If anybody has a comment, again, you can come to the podium. Please state your name and your address. Yeah.
Would you like me to start over?
No, that's okay.
Okay. Currently 4.41 million positive child COVID cases, which result in 1.9% of hospitalizations, which is roughly around 80,000, depending on which source you are going with, which are resulting in 378 deaths to date. This is a 0.004% death rate amongst hospitalized children and a 0.008 death rate amongst positive cases. Data, again, varies across sources depending on who you are talking to. AAAP tweeted on 8/12 last Thursday that research shows that schools where children and adults are consistently masked are effective in preventing transmission. A June 30th article in Duke Today makes the claim that the widespread use of masks in schools can effectively prevent COVID-19 transmission and provide a safe learning environment. This is backed by 2 Duke MDs based on information in K-12 schools in North Carolina. What both fail to provide is a control group study. They make a claim based on one side of the information. There is no scientific studies done. In fact, the Duke Today article states further in that we don't have data from North Carolina during that time frame because everybody was masked, so they don't have any data to put that against. The only thing that that article does provide is that children who were masked have a lower transmission rate, but it doesn't depend on if they're 3 feet apart or more than 3 feet apart. We're told to trust the scientists. There is no data to back up the claims being made in the name of science. There's speculation and half-truths. There are conflictions among the medical community. There's conflicting information from politicians. We're seeing a very do as I say, don't do as I do situation. We're misled on every turn. We are told not to question. We are told not to research on our own, as we do not seem to have the capacity to understand information outside our area of expertise. I'm a tax accountant. I can understand complicated matters. At what point do we stop playing the political game and start living in reality? To stop letting emotions and agenda drive our actions, to actually look at the data and make rational decisions regarding the well-being of our children. We live in a world of risk, yet we are in a situation where we are told until there is no risk of COVID, we cannot return to normal. At some point, we have to say no more. We have to have community leaders be willing to make the stand. There has to be an acceptable level of risk. It is simply irresponsible and psychologically abusive to continue giving children the fear that the air around them is toxic, and their classmates may potentially have a virus so deadly that even the mere breath of them could be murderous to them and those they love. We're not asking for a mask ban. We're asking for options, and we're asking that you respect the decisions of parents who know their medical needs of their children. None of us in this room know all the medical needs of every child in the district. The parents know their children and what they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments.
Good evening, folks. My name is James Ricotta. I'm a congressional candidate for the 23rd District, and my address is 1426 Clendenning Road, Lot 19, Painted Post, New York, 14870. This is the second board meeting I've been to in 2 days. I was at the Corning board meeting yesterday where they spent a lot of time going over the mask mandates and what they have to do and the things that they have to do as far as keeping our children safe. I looked at their faces when this was going on, and I could tell that they were not happy about having to do this. In fact, I would guess that they were not for it as far as putting masks on our children. Now, I've also heard that critical race theory and the LBGT agenda is going to be taught in these school districts. I know this isn't an answer, not answer, but I don't know if that's true. But again, I'm going to put it to every school board I go to, every meeting. I'm going to try to hit every place in my district. I'm going to try to hit every school board meeting and basically put to you folks the same question. Do you want to go down in history as being the board members that taught our kids socialism, that taught our kids that to normalize pedophilia and unnatural behavior and basically abuse children by putting them in masks? Or do you want to go down in history as the school board that says enough is enough? I am done listening to these people that their information changes from week to week. You don't know. I recall at the very beginning of this, they said the children aren't really affected by the COVID. They don't get it. If they do, it's mild cases, but putting masks on our children, I'm dead set against it. In fact, I will not send my child back to school because of the mask mandates and what has been proposed may be taught in the schools around here. Again, I just put it to you folks. You are our last line of defense. You, I know, have people pulling strings. I know you have finances that are behind the protocols and the things that you all have to deal with in this next school year. What I'm asking you all is to do a gut check. Just say to yourselves, do we want to be the ones that destroys the minds of our children and abuse them while we're doing it by putting them in boxes and putting masks on their face? Do we want to be those people? Or do we want to be the people that said to you, the powers that be, no more. We are going to fill our schools this year with children. We are going to teach our children this year. We're not going to do it on a TV screen. We're going to be in front of our kids and teach them. So far, these mask mandates have taught nothing but fear. These kids are afraid to be in school. They're afraid to go next to other kids and play. I have an 8-year-old daughter. I'm 53 years old, but I have an 8-year-old. And it hurts my heart to tell her again this year, Daddy, can I go back to school this year? No, honey, I don't want to put a mask on you. But again, folks, I'm pleading with you. Which part of history do you want to be on the side of? Do you want to be the villains, or do you want to be the saviors of the kids of this district? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
My name's Courtney Evans. I live at 178 Denver. I actually wasn't going to speak, so I don't have a paper. I don't have anything set, but it's for my kids. So I have twin boys who are 6 years old, and I have a daughter who just turned 5. Well, they'll be 5 in August. I'm shaking, I'm sorry. But anyways, so They all are looking forward to school. Thankfully, I can homeschool, and I already bought the curriculum. I'm fine with homeschooling. I would love for them to go to school, but I can't if they're wearing a mask, because I went to school for early childhood. The first thing a kid learns is your face. The first thing they see is a face. I will not send my kid to a school where she's not going to see a face for the first time being in school. She's nervous to go anyways. And then I'm going to send her in there with a mask on, and then her teacher's going to be sitting up there. She's not going to know if she's smiling. Her teacher's not going to know if she's upset or nervous or scared. You want to know why? Because her face is going to be covered. A teacher's not just going to walk up to her and go, "Hey, are you having a good day?" or "Hey, are you sad today?" They don't do that. But if they see a kid that is sitting at a desk and they do look sad because they can see their face, they're going to go up to them and make sure that they are going to be okay. Unfortunately, with a mask on, they won't do that. My other thing is the fact that my child has asthma. He actually was hospitalized when he was 2 years old at Arnott for over 5 nights. That was the worst time in my life. Putting a mask on him and sitting home not knowing how he's doing, obviously a teacher's going to say, well, actually I have friends that are teachers and they say, oh, the kids are doing fine. Yeah, we're going to be told the kids are doing fine because guess what? Kids aren't going to complain when they're being forced to do something. They're going to just do it. Just like kids don't really complain when they have to get buckled to get in a car, because we force them to do it. So if you're forcing a child to wear a mask, you are literally forcing, they're not going to complain to you. They're just going to say what they want, they're just going to say what you think they want to hear, is my opinion. I will not send my kid in a mask knowing that I'm going to be sitting home not in one. I'm not going to enjoy knowing that he's probably not going to be breathing as well as everyone probably expects him to breathe, even though his face is covered. I could go on, but I'm shaking, so I'm going to go sit. But thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brittany. I live at 300 Church Street, Breezeport. I also wasn't going to speak, and I know I look like a hot mess, but I have my kids. I have a bachelor's degree in science of nursing, and I understand how viruses spread. It's not going to stop. Viruses mutate, they change. The flu did it, and the risk for children is significantly low. Vaccines are iffy, and I just want to be able to take politics out of how our children are going to be treated against this vaccine. They're not at risk. The ones who are at risk are have a lot of comorbidities, such as asthma, and I believe that it should be up to the parents to mask their children or not to mask their children, and for us to teach our kids that they have a voice and they should be able to say whether they want to or not. My son is 4. He will be going to preschool, to school in general for the first time ever. And my daughter is 7, and she'll be going into 2nd grade. I gave her the option last year to go to school or not to go to school, and she would prefer to go to school because they need that socialization. Distancing, being away from each other the way that they have been is not good for them mentally. It doesn't encourage a learning environment, and it's not doing anything for their health at all.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Bates, and I live at 609 Watkins Road. All right, I'm going to read off my papers so I stay on track. In June, I brought my son in for his kindergarten screening. A moment, and this is why this is so important, because parents are struggling right now, okay? A moment of a lifetime for a mom to send their firstborn to school was drowned out with a heavy darkness. I do not believe in a new normal, keeping kids 6 feet apart and masking their every emotion. As I watched my son walk to the back of the office for his screening, my eyes began to swell with tears. I couldn't see my son's reaction with a mask up to his eyeballs, nor could he see mine. It was the most uncomfortable thing I have ever felt. As I patiently waited, I watched everyone roam the school, unable to see anyone's face. I spoke with the principal, Mr. Patterson, and he was friendly as could be. I enjoyed him very much. I wanted to be happy. He was friendly. The staff seemed friendly. This should be so exciting, but it wasn't. We exited the building and removed our masks. I pretended to be happy for my son. In the car, he joyfully talked about friends, the bus, and other typical questions about what he would do at school. Pulling away that day, I knew right then and there that we would not be returning to Gardner Road if kids are mandated to wear masks. We are embracing the very peaceful decision to homeschool this year if masks are in place. This was not my first choice. Public school was. Some people think this will be hard, and yes, maybe it will be. But I can think of one single thing much harder than homeschooling, and that is complying with something that is not best for my child, nor do I believe in it. The literature is overflowing with adverse side effects from mask wearing, but no one has any idea how long-term mask wearing is detrimentally affecting their social, emotional, and psychological well-being now or 10 years from now. I am so tired of hearing that kids are resilient to masks. How many people do you know in your life that look okay on the outside but are suffering on the inside? I guarantee that is every single one of us, or has been every single one of us. What I do know is that children become severely more ill from the flu compared to COVID. I could go on statistically regarding all of the ways that children are potentially harmed far worse than COVID, but that right there should be enough. We are supposed to get sick. We have always gotten sick, and we always will get sick. In a sensitive manner, we will get COVID, we will get the flu, we will get the stomach bug, seasonal allergies, pink eye, strep throat, and everything in between. We're not supposed to just lock ourselves up in bubble wrap and mask up forever. Mask wearing is probably one of the #1 most talked about and controversial issues in 2020 and 2021. As a mother, I cannot bear the thought of my child in a mask. In contrary, there is someone else in this building with an opposing viewpoint that cannot bear the thought of their child without a mask.
Stephanie, I'm sorry, I'm going to have you wrap up, okay, please?
That the school reopening plans include mask optional. We all pay taxes. The option to uniformly mask children infuriates some of the population and delights others, and vice versa. Currently, only the feelings of taxpayers who want their child masked are being violated. With such controversy, the schools should not support some of the families and not the others. To come together as a community and do what is right, I am simply asking that masks are optional. This takes it out of the school's hands and puts it right into the parents, exactly where it belongs.
Thank you. As others are coming to speak, I just want to remind you, please keep it to 3 minutes. I want to give everybody enough time, and so just out of the courtesy of everybody else that's in the audience, please keep it to 3 minutes.
Hello. My name is Jackie Shope, and I live at 128 Olcott Road, Big Flats. I'm a mother of 3 girls going into 5th, 4th, and 2nd grade. My kids are very anxious about going to school next year and wearing the masks. Kids who are going to be wearing masks all day is not okay, and this masking has gotten out of control very fast, and these kids deserve better. The health effects of forcing kids to breathe through the sweat, bacteria, dirt, and spit-soaked rags across their face all day for 7+ hours is disgusting. My children came home last year in these rags, covered in filth, wet, covered, just soaked and wet. And I think, how could that remotely be healthy for a child to sit in a disgusting, soaked rag on their face all day for 7+ hours? What about the significant mental health implications of masking children and the anxiety that they go through wearing these masks? It's disgusting, and it makes me sick to think about my children going through all this. My child has anxiety, and every day she cried going to school and wearing these masks on her face every day. She came home one day complaining that she felt like she was going to throw up, and she was sick right as I pulled up and picked her up at school. As soon as she came in to my car and took the mask off, she was immediately better as soon as she took the mask off. My children will not be sent to school next year also if the mask mandate is going to be placed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Angie Finlayson. I live at 10 Glider Circle in Elmira. I have 3 kids in the district, 17, 15, she goes to BOCES, and a 12-year-old. All 3 of my children are vaccinated. They sent me here with one question, and that is, if they wear masks in school, will they have to quarantine if they're exposed? That's their biggest fear, is having to quarantine and missing instruction. And I support these mama bears here with the Unmask Our Kids movement. I completely support their choice. But for my kids, they want to be in school, period. It doesn't matter to them if they're wearing masks. It matters to me, but it's not about me, and it's about our kids. And so I'm hoping to hear some information on that tonight as you guys debate the issue. And I also want to say that all 3 of my children saw COVID come through our house. So kids are not immune from it. One of my children was very, very severely impacted. And she's fine now, thank God. And I agree, illnesses come and they go, and we're meant to get sick, but I'm thankful for the opportunity to have vaccines. I'm thankful for the opportunity to make a choice and wear a mask if my kids want to. And so I would just appreciate that opportunity being afforded this year going forward. If the kids choose to wear a mask to shorten a quarantine, should they be exposed, that they be allowed to do so. And that's basically it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joe Brennan, and my address is 8 Ambrose Drive in Horseheads. And I'm a father of 5, 4 kids in the district, and I'm also a Chemung County legislator that represents part of Horseheads. So I came out to listen to the comments tonight, and first I just want to say thank you guys for your service on the school board. As a county legislator, you know, we don't really receive a lot as far as benefits and salary go, but I know that for you guys it's a lot less, if anything at all. So I know that this is an act of service for you guys. So with that in mind, you know, I came out to listen to what people have to say, and many people are very emotional over this issue, and it really demands that, you know, there was a time last year where it made sense, or at least it was understandable, to say we don't know enough about this, you know, about COVID, and we need to, you know, be on Zoom and doing things remotely. But that time has come and gone. It's, you know, it's been a year and a half, and it's at the point where we need to allow life to go on, and we need to allow our children to, you know, if they want to come to school without masks, we need to allow that. And we need to also allow parents to make a choice, because it seems as though, you know, based on the commercials I'm seeing on TV, You've got this doctor on a commercial saying that it's that the vaccine is approved for anybody that's 12 and up, and then he says, and I hope that in the next couple of months it's going to be eligible for my daughter that's under 12. So they're soft conditioning us to let us know that the vaccine is probably going to be approved for children of all ages or 5 and up. And so as much as I want to speak about masks tonight, we also need to be mindful of the fact that the vaccine may soon be approved for any school-age child. And I don't want to see my children be forced to take the vaccine to go to school. So hopefully you'll listen to the members of the community that have spoken out tonight. I know that with us in the Chemung County Legislature, all 15 of us are up for re-election every 4 years, and that you guys run staggered terms. So I hope that those of you that are seeking re-election this coming year will take this into account, because people are asking me, what can we do to stop this? And with local control, it really comes down to who you elect. So I really hope that those of you that want to continue to serve will serve the interests of the people that elect you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. Bear with me, I'm going to try to get through this without crying. So, I'm pleading with you guys as Horsehead Central School District's board. Amy Cruz, 363 County Road 64. To amend it to make masks optional for all students and allow for parents to make the choice to mask their child or not. First off, since October, my son has been battling with rawness, bleeding, and scabs inside his nose. And yes, I attribute it to the masks. So we've been treating it with polysporin, and I've tried 10 different style of masks to see if it improved, to see if that helped, and it did not. And yes, my child wore laundered masks clean every day. We did not reuse day after day. We were just pushing through, doing what we had to do so he could get his education. After taking my child to this doctor for his well visit this last Thursday, I found out why we couldn't get it to go away. He has a bacterial infection in his nose that can lead to other health problems. He has to take an antibiotic and antibiotic cream to get rid of this bacterial infection now. Here I thought this was skin irritation, and when school ended, the mask could come off and it would go away, but it didn't go away. So now I feel like I failed my son because I thought his education was more important. That we could just push through and end the year, and next school year would be better. But here my child was suffering with masks all last year. And I will not let that happen again. I will stand up for my child, and I am here standing up for my child's right to breathe fresh air, my child's right to not get more sick from a mask, my child's right for a public education, and my child's right to see the faces of his teachers and his friends. The science does not support the masks any longer. Many studies have been completed over the last 16 months with control groups and have proven this, and I have lots of data for you guys if you need it. Masks are unsafe for our children, and COVID poses almost no risk to our children. It is not fatal for 99.999% of children, so forcing them to wear masks is neither logical nor beneficial to them. Our children deserve a normal education and have endured this for too long. At this point, you are psychologically and mentally damaging them beyond having to breathe their own carbon dioxide. Our children need to breathe fresh air. Masks cause dissociation. They are not bonding with their teachers, fellow students, or other staff members that interact with our children. Suicides in youth has gone up 5-fold in the past 6 months throughout this country. Also, I know what was best for my child's health. I will make their health decisions for my child along with my child's doctor. I do not look to nor need the state, the school district, or the unions to make those decisions and choices for me. I look to the school district to educate my child on science, math, history, English, gym, music, art. Decisions about my child's health should be on mine alone. I just plead with you to just look outside of the box and look at all the research, not just one side. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more. Okay. I'd like to thank everybody who did come out tonight. It's always great to hear the comments and the concerns from our community. We definitely take that into consideration with our discussions. If you are going to continue to stay tonight, I encourage you. We will be having a discussion here coming up on the reopening plan for our schools, where we will be talking about requirements. We will be talking about masking. And again, as Dr. Douglas said, it's not an open discussion. It's just a discussion within the board. And if you have additional concerns or questions, you can always contact Dr. Douglas directly or come to a future board meeting. But thank you, all of you, for your comments. I know it's not easy to stand up in front of a session like this, and I definitely applaud you for doing that on behalf of your children. So thank you. And my screen went blank, so let me get back to the agenda. Okay, next up on the agenda, we have our presentations. So we'll turn it over to Hunt to talk about our project scope.
Actually, I'm going to give them a little bit of time to get in position and get set. And so those members of the community also understand. We do appreciate your comments, as our president has said. The board does not play politics. They do not look at an issue to get elected. They do what's best that is in their global response for the community and in a fulfillment of the expectations or requirements of either the state education, the state of New York, or the State Department of Health. Unfortunately, a couple of them are in a big set of quandary right now, and that is why we will have a discussion a little later. To the individual about their child with vaccination, that is a county health department issue, and just so that you know, if anyone is vaccinated and does not show symptoms, they would not have to quarantine. It's only if they show symptoms. So I'll try to answer a couple of those questions as Jeff gets ready. In addition, the state education department has handed down high recommendations. We will talk about that as I've got to give information to the board in regards to that, some of our data that we have in regards to community transmission, and we will have a discussion, like Christine Dale said, in regards to some of the things that we need, because most of our safety plan is intact about cleaning, hygiene, and everything else, which not a lot of people have issues with. But the big things are masking, transportation, athletics, band, distancing, eating, and so forth. And those are some of the things that we have to narrow in. The hard part is we are in a state of transition from one elected leadership that is outgoing to another, and they have already put in the news media that they are going to put something in place. So we are sort of at a quandary at this point. So that will be some of our focus of discussion. Really, the purpose of tonight, even though we had the added opportunity for people to speak, we know that there's always two sides of the issue and no one side is the predominant side. Just like if you were here and we went one way, the other side would come out the next time. That's the delicacy of the nature of my job, the board, my team, and my staff that are trying to do the best they can. But the one thing we guaranteed, and we are putting into place, is 5 days in-person school. How? Some of the details are out there, but we are going to be in school and not behind a camera. So, to add to some of our health and safety, to add to bringing the district where the community overwhelmingly stated 4 years ago at 83% that the district had to be brought into the current times, renovated, and brought up to speed, We are in the process of completing our first capital project, which was started in 2017. It's scheduled to finish up next summer. As you can see, there's quite a mess, but some things are starting to get into final form, at least on the outside, and that's all through the hard work of the boards, the administrative team, the staff, and our architect and our construction manager. With that, the board has asked us what's next, because we had told the community there would be a requirement over probably a 10 to 12 years to do 3 like-sized projects to bring every building up and address aging infrastructure that should not be utilized as a classroom space anymore. So tonight is, I think, the third meeting as we've started that process, because we were trying to narrow in the scope and the budget of it, that's what Hunt is here for, which is the capital construction over the next 4 to 5 years. And we'll start hitting the elementary schools, hopefully finally fix the middle school parking conundrum, and take care of the south wing of the high school at this point. So there's a lot to do, and then there's even a third project behind that to finish up elementaries, finish up the secondaries, and right-size everything so that kids have the best environment to go as well as the right-sized environment. So tonight, Jeff is coming back to give an update from where we were at the last one. All of these presentations are online so that you can see them and follow along if you need to, as we are potentially preparing for a vote on December 7th. Mr. Robbins, I turn it over to Hunt.
Before we get started, I don't see the presentation in the board docs for this.
This may, because it was being worked on right up to the bat, I would ask you to go down, and then we will get that in the update out to the board members.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. So since our last meeting, which was just a week ago, we did some further evaluation of the district's needs and spaces, and that led to some further development in the plans. This right here is showing the Big Flats existing building, and I'm going to go on there, but I want to set the stage a little bit. One of those activities that we did was meet with the special ed department and support services, and that led to quite a bit of conversation about some of the needs and some of the existing space that's not adequate for those programs. And it was really strongly determined that in part of doing this project, all spaces should have adequate square footage and space to do the program that it needs to do and to support the students. So we wanted to make sure that was incorporated. So that's what we've been working on here this week. And this, shows what needs to happen at Big Flats. It's very similar to what it was we showed you last week. It actually didn't have to have a whole lot of changes, and that's largely because the realignment of some of the special ed programs to even it out throughout the district, and to there was some existing space that could be utilized here, and our addition was maybe a little bit bigger than it needed to be for last time. So all that came together, and what we showed you here before still works here. It gives proper classrooms for 12-1-1s and 15-1s, reading support, social workers and psychologists, all of that. Okay, so then we go into the next building is going to be Gardner Road. This one was impacted quite a bit more by this study. So as we got into this, you can see the blue area represents additions, and you see that's a lot larger than we showed last time. Just going to zoom in here on it for us. So before we had just 4 classrooms, and when we really looked at this, it took a little bit more. Part of that is the pre-K program. There's 2, Tony, I'm not going to get this right, but basically special ed pre-K classrooms in the district, and they were targeted to be centralized here. And then there's also 3 pre-K rooms at each elementary building. So that led to 5 pre-K rooms here at Gardner Road, where the other 2 buildings would have 3. So that had a greater need. Also, the 811 program that's run by BOCES would be at this building. And then, of course, the 15 ones that we've spoke about, making sure there's room for that and the reading programs. So all that said, created a little bit bigger of an addition here. And that, affected the outdoor basketball court. So we were showing that being moved over and replaced. And then the paving area all the way to get out there. It's in real rough shape already, and we would have to have fire truck access to get there. Now we go, yes. Yes, I can. Yeah, so it would be an enclosed courtyard. Yeah, yeah. It's pretty common to have a courtyard in a school. You have it here at the high school. We've tried different programs inside the courtyard, but ultimately, just having grass that's easily maintainable seems to be the best thing, because having activities out there can somewhat be distracting to some of the classrooms. But they're grass alcoves right now, and it would remain that way. There's a direct entrance into it, so you can bring equipment in. In some cases, we try to create a maintenance room accessed off the courtyard, so you can keep equipment in there to maintain it. And we would look at doing that here also. Yep. So now we come over to Ridge Road, and this is the existing plan at Ridge Road. This one was affected by some of these support services too. It looks largely the same. We had the addition shown this way, but we had some future rooms that we would have to build in this at this time frame to accommodate all the programs appropriately. So we showed that here, and again, the same theme. We have the 15 ones, the 12 ones, right-sizing music and art, and the library and cafeteria and gymnasiums, expanding that with the added students at the building. This building also has a new bus loop out front to accommodate the increased bus services, and to maintain a parent drop-off loop out back and improve that area also. I think that's it. I think I hit that. The cafeteria, libraries, music, and gymnasium are being, and art room are being upgraded at all 3 elementary buildings. Now we get over to the high school, and as Tom mentioned, the south wing has been the target, and we looked at this at the last referendum, but of course, with maximizing state aid, it's really difficult to do a whole campus project completion all at one time. And the goal is to always make it as aidable as possible and to have the least impact to the taxpayers. So that would be another phase coming back here to create a large gymnasium and support spaces with locker rooms and circulation spaces, bleachers, entrance, all of that kind of thing on the first floor. And then the second floor, I always hit the wrong one, sorry, would also have an auxiliary gym. The idea was with batting cages, cheerleading space, and a wrestling room, and then a second floor training track, running space, and then some of the associated special ed rooms would be renovated. Then we did some further evaluation of the intermediate school, and with the grade level alignments not really changing or anything here, there wasn't a large need here except for pan down here a little bit, is we had looked at renovating the locker rooms and doing some upgrades to this gymnasium in the last project, but it didn't fit financially. So the idea would be to do that work this time around. And there's some roof replacement work that is required here, again, to maintain your infrastructure. The next plan isn't greatly developed, but the idea is to, as Tom had mentioned, updating that parking lot and drop-off area to improve that whole experience for parents coming in and picking up or dropping off their students. So that would be completely redone as part of this also. Now, that's what I have for the plan slides. I can go into some of the cost information and some of our next steps. Is there anybody have any questions about the scope or these plans that we've put in front of you here today? Yes.
Is there anything you think we're missing?
No. I think we've done a pretty thorough job going through past information and evaluations of the facilities to make sure that we're hitting the key infrastructure needs. One of the things I failed to mention at the high school is there's always roofs, right? You can never get all the roofs done at one time. You don't necessarily want to do them all at one time because that means you have to replace them all at one time, and the cost gets pretty extensive. But there are some roofs like over this room that we have to look at, and like the boiler room area and some other areas that we haven't touched yet that are going to come off their warranty that we've included. So we have evaluated that, and the current project's hitting a lot of the infrastructure needs with boilers and things like that. And beyond, yeah.
As we've been going through, like we've done, I think, the Gardner Road, the Ridge Road, we started putting in the infrastructure for schools. As we touch the other buildings, we are going to try to do that same infrastructure. Then really all it amounts to is we have to put the infrastructure in the actual schools, which I think is part of pieces of this next project. But it's going to take 2 full projects. Just like here at the high school, it'll take 2 or 3 to do. A lot of our rooms will be touched, but until the loop's completed, you can't just turn it on. That's cool.
So, are you saying it's a great school, so we know the schooling until the third phase of the project is complete?
No, I'm not saying that.
So, coming online versus others could, we could pay for everything and do that. We have to be strategic, like Gardner Road is already set up. If we get the cooling there, you put it in, and that will be set. Just like in 2 years, this is already approved, Center Street will be at least addressed until eventually the time comes to turn that into an adult-only building for the community, and then the other buildings will come down with some partial cooling and then more.
Yeah, and the priority has been the common spaces, right? Hitting, any of the assembly spaces, the libraries, the cafeterias, art rooms, those spaces that every student goes to would be the priority one to hit. Okay, and as we're renovating them all here, they would have all that infrastructure installed in this project. Do you turn it on? Yeah. Right.
No, but you're saying the right thing. It's a hard question, okay? And that's why I say you're doing it. I hate to go and say, you guys get in there, you're in the same building, and you're not exactly that part of the process. I may have to say, this is discussion we'll have down the road, we are going to try to maximize our infrastructure as quickly as possible, but it does mean there will be some winners and some losers for the time being. Like me personally, if I could get a second floor school before the first floor, that would be ideal because we know each price. So we will have to look at that and try to balance. But even at the high school, at the end of the first project, 70% of the rooms are able to be cool. They're going to be cool. But there's another 25% that won't. So hopefully that gives you an idea. As soon as we can, we are going to try to bring things online. What we're also going to try to do is
You're welcome.
you know how many questions I'm going to get tomorrow. Just be straightforward. That's the truth. I have a question on the school.
Yeah. There is, and thank you. I was going to get to that. I skipped over it. I didn't have a plan for that yet, and we'll have that next time. But the idea had always been to, again, because of aidability, was to stage some of those outbuildings around the stadium. And this project currently is planned to include locker rooms, replace the field house locker rooms that are out, at the old field, and band storage. So that is budgeted in here and planned in also.
I
Yep.
think that's the big thing for the people that haven't been following. School districts are only allowed to get so much additional aid for outside structures. So to maximize that money we get from the state to do that instead of having to look at basically for it, we try to do what we can and balance it off. And if it takes two projects, remember, every 5 years, our aid calculation fully recycled. So say in the first year I got $10 million to do outside the building. So you saw parking lots and everything. Saved. Now what happens 5 years later, I get another extra $10 million. So budget for outside the building and you have to try to balance that. Because in the third project, I get another $10 million. Well remember, we have a whole stadium that has to be repurposed or rebuilt. Tennis court. We got to finish the parking lot. So all of that is part of each project. But right now, we're trying to finish up the district stadium because eventually outside the district stadium will be another field on that side of the Center Street. Guess what? We're going to use the band here. Try to keep it off of our parking lots and other places. Our whole goal as a board, to me, over the time, is how do we try to best environment for high school, that's high school, middle school, that's middle school, elementary, that's elementary. And that's what we're trying to do.
Thanks. Right, so we did look at projected enrollment numbers, and we did start with enrollment numbers from 1920. Because as we all know, 2021 was skewed because of what's going on. So we started at 1920, and then there's enrollment projections that, take us beyond. For elementary, the state requires you to project out 5 years. So that's what we used in those projections. And also some of those rooms from last time to this time, as I mentioned, were really the support services and make sure we got them in adequate space, because there's so many of those services that are being taught out of a closet somewhere and a stage and inadequate space. So that also increased the need for some of those additions. Well, these plans include about 30. And yeah, excuse me? So it's about the same, but you gain some efficiencies by having one less elementary. So even though we have very similar number of total rooms, there's efficiency gained by combining some of the programs.
No, what happens is where Jeff is talking about some of the efficiencies, if we have, say, a kindergarten that is at 16 in one building but 20 in the other, and 23 in the other, and 23 in the other, when you right-size the classrooms and you minimize the denominator from 4 classrooms to 3, you might have 3 or 4 classrooms of 22 right across the board. That's what he means by the efficiency. But there's also another thing. A lot of our classrooms currently that we have are undersized for today's requirements, recommendations, and that through this process of over 2 projects, that's what will also be completed, is that we have to build the new ones so that we can close, but then we have to go through and right-size all the other ones and have the classrooms in position. That's what they're doing. And I just wanted to correct Jeff. We aren't going by enrollment from 1920. We're going by enrollment from 2019, 2020. Because when he said that, I said in 1920, no, we aren't going there.
Sorry.
But yeah, those slips, but that's important. We can't go by COVID numbers. We have to go by what's there. And what the community really has to understand is that there's still this political dynamo out there of natural gas. And no matter what, if natural gas is ever changed in the state of New York, none of the districts in this area will be able to support the influx of students. There will be a massive building expansion. By having an adult-only building, if we had to convert it for a little bit, we could, to try to handle that. So those are some of the long-range goals. But classroom to classroom, we're keeping consistent, and we are trying to do something probably in the second phase where we have pre-K right now for, I think it's 9 classes. We will try to expand that to 18 to have full pre-K. For anyone 4 years old, they get a free day, and we may be looking at how do we expand the length of the day in that as well. So that comes with extra aid from the state. So the big thing is Hunt is trying to maximize our opportunities for aid. We're trying to also maximize some of our educational opportunities down the road, but it just takes this initial investment to get it started. But good question. Yeah. Yeah. We have actually leveled off. Yeah, I mean, you've seen that decrease because of Exodus and so forth. But on top of it, people are not having as many kids as in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Something to say about those decades. But the whole point is we do have to look at our structure in the district as well. We have one of the best second-level entry homes and third-level entry home markets in the area. In other words, somebody may get a starter home. It's usually not as much as in Horseheads. But that second-level home is usually in Horseheads as well as the third, and we have massive amount of space to build. We have, at least just in Big Flats alone, there's a potential of anywhere from 60 to 120 new housing units that are children age, second-level entry homes. I can't put all those kids in Big Flats. That's why we have to look at all of this. So, but you take it a stage at a time, a year at a year. They aren't all of a sudden all going to show up, but we have to have that plan in place.
Okay. So this just kind of identifies, we've carried this through the activities we're going through. So developing the building plans, we've pretty much gotten through that. Evaluating the outstanding needs of each building, we've done that. And then really just put that into a scope document so we can get together a budget. That's been done. Developing the estimate and budget, I say in progress because I'm going to show you some numbers here tonight, but it is being worked on actively, and we're testing that against the aidability. So that takes some effort. Once we get this plan all sorted, there's got to be more time to sort through the aidability. And that'll all come together in your financial plan, which is going to be first submitted at your next board meeting on the 1st. So that's why I say that's in progress. And then after that, the next activity is the seeker review. That's the state environmental review that you have to do for a project, and that would begin after your September 9th board meeting. And then the construction schedule will be determined based on all this other information.
Jeff, if I can add, just so that the board knows, that's not a scheduled board meeting September 9th, but it is now a scheduled board meeting for special. It will only be for the purpose of contracting or any last-minute hiring. It won't be any other topic whatsoever on that meeting.
And the capital project, right?
Oh, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Capital project, yeah. Sorry.
That's right. Okay, and then, so here's some budget information. So as we boiled all that down, the plans I showed you and the scope we've talked about, this is how it breaks down by building, and the total there is up to just over 113 million. So it's more than what we showed last time, and we wanted to get that out there. You can also see the column about approval dates. That's key to factoring in the financial plan. And those dates are when your aid resets, as Tom had spoke to that question. So you can see the intermediate school would be the one that you could jump right out with because there's plenty of available aid there. And we could do some of that work right away. And then the elementary schools would be the next item, along with the stadium locker room, where the high school would be the last one to reset.
Now, Jeff, if I'm correct, those are the dates that we cannot get our building permit before those dates.
Right.
So we can actually, if it's, say, approved December 7th, we can jumpstart to get started on anything in the 2023 to get through state ed, and we still have a little time for the high school and so forth because of the way the aid cycles, correct?
Yeah, so those are the dates that you can get your building permit, any from that date or after, and have the aid reset. But there's plenty of work to do ahead of it. You know, the design work usually takes about a year to go through with the design and approval process. So really what that means is a 3-1 elementary approval means it really needs to start at the beginning of 22.
So in essence, say we were able to keep to this time, get approval, we pretty much end this project somewhere around next summer, which is really December. There would really be a natural flow right into it, which has potential cost savings to us as well as bidder response to us because they're already here.
Yes, exactly. That is the concept. Keep that motivation going. And then this is our schedule and about the pre-ref schedule, you know, all those different things we mentioned. It's a lot to take in here. The bolded rows are the board action or board meeting times. So you can see we are here on 8/17. The idea for the next 2 weeks would be further develop the financial plan to see how it would get funded, and then present that to you on the September 1st with your financial advisors. And then from there, any final tweaking or adjustments that might need to be done would be done between then and the 9th. And then the 9th, all we really need is a thumbs up that the scope we're talking about is what the district would like, or the board would like to pursue, and we begin the seeker. And then the big meeting is October 14th. That's when the board would be asked to take action on whether you want to move forward with this proposition and set the vote date of December 7th. Any questions about that?
Mr. Adams?
Yes.
That's our next meeting.
Yeah.
What it is we really had to narrow this down into specificity to have that meeting with our fiscal advisors. They will be with us at the next meeting to talk about that as well. And just so that the board knows as well as the community, just remember, they told us we'd have a 2%. They give us the potential worst case scenario. So that's what we end up looking at, because right now we're in the best case scenario where we're getting the project done, we're getting state aid, we're using some of our reserves, but we're really not adding to the tax base. We've actually lowered it. But yes, that's why once they get these financials, now Ms. Bizzetti, Jeff will start having conversations with them to prepare for the first. Yep.
And that's my last slide.
Other questions? In other words, what I was asking is, are we missing anything? It's really important at this point. We've put a lot up there, but is there anything that we shouldn't be doing, or is there anything that's up there that maybe you say, ooh, we thought about this, but I didn't see it up there. Do we need to? This is that sort of last moment, because once we get into it with the fiscal advisors, that's where we start looking at aidability, trimming, and saying what we can do to bring back the project here that's as similar. There may be a cost. Remember, right now, we said 2, there was none. If we were at 3, is that bad? I don't know. But that's where the board's going to have to say, and then if you say we want it at 2.5, then we have some work to do before the 9th. Does that make sense to everyone? So last time, anything that you think of that we're missing, and just so that you know, in case you forget tonight, just email me within the next 24 hours. If something pops up, I can at least get it to Jeff, but we really need to draw that line. Is that acceptable to everybody? Just thumbs up, thumbs down? Yes. Yeah, we just didn't have time tonight, Nancy. Where'd she go? Oh, there you are. If Jeff gets it to you, can you go, if you need my computer, go and put it up so it's under executive. Because this is privileged communication, proprietary on theirs, we will send it up under the executive for tonight's meeting, under the executive content. Okay? No problem. Where it needs to be changed, they address it. But you don't usually get into that. That's final drawings. What happens is the concept's there. It's just like, we know that we're replacing the steam boiler that's been from 1940 here. It's being done right now. That's why when you walk outside, you'll see parts to it. But what happens is when we were talking about it, we said we're looking at all of our HVAC to bring it up. And that's what they put in. Ultimately, once we have the final set of drawings, that's where Mike comes in, mine comes in, and if you ask us a question, hey, have you done that? And if we've missed it, sometimes we have to add it, but if not, it might also be at a later time. Like for the second project, I expected the facility center to be leveled and do the rest of that parking lot. We found out that through this project, it's better to put that in the third project at the beginning of the third project than it is to do in the second. One is it saves us money to use for other exterior items. And then, so that's all that scope. Now, and please forgive me, it's sort of the humor. When we started this project, we found like 20-something cesspools. I hate to say, I don't know what's going to be out under that parking lot, but that all adds to those things, and sometimes things have to be rerouted. We know our water infrastructure is pretty good now, so we don't think there's as much. But those are those items that are discoverable or undiscoverable that we have to address as we go once we see them. Biggest thing is exterior roofs, drainage, interior classrooms, electrical, HVAC is a lot of what they do. Other things?
Yeah, I would just say this, that all your buildings' main infrastructure is already being accounted for in the current project. So this project really ties into that, and it extends it to the spaces that are being renovated and upgrading in those at the terminal end, the other end. The infrastructure at the head end, the boiler room end, is really being accounted for already with the current funding.
And wherever we can, we're trying to update everything to current code. One is once they touch it, they must do that. So helps Mike, it helps everybody. We start to get efficiencies from that as well. Any other questions? Some of that is as you touch classrooms, you're upgrading that structure.
Yeah.
So in a way, it gives us sort of that 5-year plan, because that's one of the things a lot of people don't realize. I can put technology in every room. If I do it all at once, it all comes obsolete at the same time. So we will have some natural staging built in from construction.
Yeah. And again, with the current funding that's been out there, a lot of that head end stuff has been recently upgraded. So you're in pretty good shape there.
Other questions? Going once? It's like an auction. All set? Just thumbs up real quick if everybody's all set for us to move forward. We are all set for the first, ready to take off. Okay? I'll notify you within the next 24 to 40 hours if there's any additions or sort of deletions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on our agenda is the reopening of our schools, and I know Dr. Douglas does have some information to share.
I've got to get ready, so if you want to start talking.
Okay. So I know Dr. Douglas is going to go through kind of where we are from state requirements. We've heard a lot of input from the community. We've received a lot of input through emails from community members, from parents, from staff members. Like I said earlier, we are taking all that into consideration, and I know, this is not, how we move forward is really not an easy decision. It weighs on all of us, and it has since COVID started. We've said a ton of times that this is unprecedented times, and it continues to be. I think all of us want more than nothing but for our children to be in school, and that's kind of, what the priority is, what we're trying to do, and the right way to go about that is what we're going to discuss tonight. So I just, I appreciate everybody's patience. I know we're all trying to do what's best for our children, what's best for the community, and there are a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of emotion around all of this, and we're all, we're going to make the best decision as we know how to do, based on the information that we have available to us. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Douglas.
I think the one mic is the battery dying.
Here.
Want this one? That way if Tom wants to talk, he can.
Okay. Right now, what you can see up on the board is basically the guidance that has been put out by the State Education Department. Unfortunately, we've been promised for over 3 months that we'd be getting guidance from the Department of Health. Whether people agree with it or not, the Department of Health was in charge. The executive order went away, but the Department of Health emergency declaration has not gone away. Department of Health actually has a constitutional obligation in New York State to set the parameters. Whether people like it or not, it does. But our Department of Health director has said, no, I'll take a pass on that. Our Commissioner of Education reminded him of those constitutional obligations, and unfortunately was forced to put out high recommendations from the State Education Department to all entities of New York State public education, even private education, because they do have some overseeing of that, as well as religious and so forth. The real dilemma comes with who makes the decision. It's been widely reported in the news that, oh, locals make the decision. I hate to say it. The news is not where we get our direction from. We are an entity of the New York State Education Department. Therefore, as an officer of that department, I must strongly adhere to what's been put out. Now, because it's high recommendations, we have to advise the board on some of those recommendations. Right now, they have put out the strong recommendation to follow the CDC guidance in the American Pediatrics Association. Whether that's what the board chooses to do or not may be all moot, because we have already been informed through county executives, through state lobbying, that once the new governor is put in, there will be a mask mandate. Whether that's true, I don't know. That's just what we've been told. If that's the case, the school district must follow it or face their own liability. That's the hard part. Right now, we just don't know. We wish we did. I will tell you, as superintendent, the board knows I get comments on one side and I get almost the same amount of comments on the other side. No matter what, I'm going to get a knife put to me in the back, proverbially, whichever way I turn. And that's not, and I know it's not personal, it's just the reality. Whether you choose one part of science or not, it's not the board's political position. The board is obligated to do what they are directed by New York State. Now, it goes one step further. Because there's some ambiguity, we don't know do we have to do what New York State says. Now, if the governor comes out and says you have to do this, we do have to do that because they're the chief executive. But the question is say they don't do anything. I had to ask our insurance companies and our lawyers, what would be the position if state education is given its guidance and the board opts to go in its own direction? Ms. Pizzetti did that. Ms. Pizzetti, would you like to let the board know what legal and the insurance company will say?
Good evening, everyone. So yes, in consultation with our insurance, they have advised, and I'll just read directly from the horse's mouth here. Schools are not required to make sure that there is no COVID spread, but they are responsible for taking the steps necessary to prevent it. If policies and procedures are in line with requirements and best practices, then the main liability exposure will come from deviation from those procedures rather than simple transmission. If a school does not follow approved guidelines and best practices, then it will be more difficult to defend a position that the school is not negligent. As your liability insurance carrier, our recommendation is that your school follow any state or local health department guidance or directives. In the absence of any state or local health department guidance, we recommend that you follow CDC guidance.
Actually, I'll stand here. That way Tom has it. Okay. So what happens is you have our insurance companies review on the legal liability for the school district in the absence of following what the state has deemed as highly. Again, take it for what it's worth. You're going to ultimately have to decide. We will put together that plan. For the most part, our plan, which is posted, is pretty much intact for cleaning that. There are some key questions that we need the board to give some guidance on, because as we've always said, the board develops the what, we do the how. But the what in this case is pretty substantial. Couple, will the Horseheads District use local health department data, CDC COVID data, or one locally determined based on a lot of those sources, which the district does, and I have that here to show you. Will Horseheads follow universal indoor masking recommendations, i.e. classroom setting versus offices, school events, indoor athletics? I think there's a whole host of other things, music, outside, indoors. And some of those nobody even knows about athletics because they start next week. Physical distancing. We do know that in the plan, in any plan, physical distancing is now set at 3 feet, not 6 feet. We don't know from music and phys ed. But at 3 feet, we can eat and be unmasked for a short duration in the cafeteria. That will help. If we are at 6 feet, we are virtually at remote option. We've made that very clear to the state. Because at 6 feet, I cannot physically fit all the kids in the classroom. We know that, and I don't think anybody wants hybrid, 2 days this week, 2 days that. I believe they would rather have 5 days full education remote and 5 days full education in person, with the latter being the preferable at all times if possible. So which act, along with distancing, I'm sorry, it just went to the wrong page. Distancing. So the one thing we know is there's a federal requirement on public transportation. Masking on our buses will be 100% masked. That's a mandate that we have to put out, unless the board says no. But all guidance indicates it must be. And they just extended that federal mandate till at least January, as of, I think, this afternoon. One is all the kids, there will be no distancing on our buses. So we will probably try to crack the windows and make it as safe as possible. That's why some parents will probably endure that long line at the middle school or the high school because they prefer that. But that's where we are at. All of our bus drivers would have to be masked as well. In cafeterias, we've already talked about that, but will Horseheads permit students to eat in the cafeteria without minimal physical distancing? Well, there is minimum physical distancing of 3 feet. I don't think you should get closer than that if that's what our distancing is, and the recommendation is at the high school level or elementaries in the classroom. And for the most part, 3 feet is where all of our students were probably pretty much close pre-COVID. Our classrooms are set up usually in neat rows. A lot of them are 3 feet apart automatically. Just remember, somebody has to get down the row, there's a chair, and then there's another chair. And the 3 feet is really center of the chair to center of the chair, and you know that that's over that 3 feet limit. So that's some of the piece, and I know Mike and his staff have been trying to make sure everybody's set up for that. Is there space in classrooms to make 6 foot distance between staff and students possible? For some staff, they may have to have 6 feet if they're unvaccinated, but if they're vaccinated, there is no minimum distancing. We would have to work on that or look around classrooms in case. But that's just so that you know some of those hold-up areas that we need to talk about. Will Horseheads use local health? I've already said that, or the data. Will Horseheads test non-vaccinated students and staff participating in music and sports? Those are some of the things I'm going to need information on. Do we test unvaccinated? Because we don't know how we can tell who's vaccinated or not. Does it really matter if they're vaccinated or unvaccinated? Do we test them? Because even if they're vaccinated and they come up positive, they have to quarantine. But it might not be for a duration. If they have symptoms, they don't have. If they don't have symptoms, they wouldn't have to quarantine. All of it are layered, multiple prevention steps that have to be considered. And we can put those in our plans. We just have to have that discussion on them. And it does not have to be all tonight, because I think we're going to get some more guidance probably by Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, so that we can more formalize plans with anything that you mentioned tonight. Will Horseheads verify vaccination status of athletes, students, coaches, advisors in high-risk sports and activities to preserve their ability to continue? I don't know how we can do this. Personally, I can't say, are you vaccinated to somebody? I believe you can ask that. We have access to New York State public health records, but are we supposed to do that? To preserve their season, it's up to the individual student families to preserve their season. That's their choice. Like I said all along, we do not want to get into mandating of vaccines. If it's mandated, it comes from the state or elected officials. Why should a board deal with that? Why should I deal with that? It's an individual person's position to make that determination for the best of their child or the best of their family or their own situation. We don't know all that, but it's one of those questions that's going to be asked. I will tell you, we have been told of the kids ages 12 to 17 in the county, I believe roughly somewhere between 2,200 and 2,400 of them have received at least one shot. Now, if you look at the 3 school districts, the age group 12 to 17 is roughly about 3,900 to 4,000 students. So we're well over 50%, but at best I ever thought would be 50%. But we don't know. Everything changes each day with different things that happen and the availability. I know one thing, our COVID vaccine clinics here were not the best attended in the summer, but it's in the summer, August 2nd, August 3rd. If we do something the first or second week to help out the health department in September, I think we'd probably get a different showing. People are readily available. So we don't know those questions, but those are some of the things. Do we want to try to offer that? Because I know for our staff, we want to make sure if they wish to have that, all I have to do is get their name and I just get to the health department. They have already assured us they will get them in. Question.
So just a quick question. So I know you said that we can't ask people if they've been vaccinated. However, so just an example, and I'm going to use what Courtney Incorporated did. So it was voluntary for people to give their vaccination status. And once the buildings got to a certain percentage of vaccinated employees, then they were able to release some of the mandates regarding distancing and masking and things like that. It was 100% voluntary, but because so many employees were all ready to take their masks off, those that were vaccinated, the majority said, showed the proof, and then once we got to that certain percentage, and Dan, you might be able to shed more light on that as well. But I'm just saying, I don't know if we got to, especially when we have the high school, for instance, where everybody at the high school is eligible. Elementary schools it's harder because none of those kids are eligible. But the high school they are. So, if it was a voluntary thing and we got to a certain level, a percentage level, could we, relax? And again, I don't know from a public school district, I don't know if we can do that versus a private company doing that.
And I think that's the key thing that you said, public school versus private company.
Right.
I don't know what the guidance would be on that. I do know, I try not to be political, but the politics in the district will be, how come the high school can be unmasked when my kid in middle school?
Right, absolutely. Right.
It's just like, how come, it's like, I know there will be a discussion, why don't we mask everybody 12 and under because they can't get vaccinated? Right. But yet, all the people 12 and up have options. That's the hard part. I would hope that the state would possibly consider some type of middle ground if possible. That, hey, when we're moving around in schools, and I'm not advocating for this, I'm just throwing out something, because I've told our legislative body, you're moving around in the schools, you're masked. You're on the buses, you're masked. When you get in the classroom, you're masked. When you sit down and you're no longer moving and you're 3 feet apart, maybe take your mask off. And if you're going to have that direct interaction, just as courtesy, put the mask on. I think that's as middle ground as you can get. It won't appease everybody, but I look at it as it gives everybody something at least. But I don't know if that's right either. Yes.
Not to get us off track, and I'm no expert, but I note on the New York State plan that was on the screen before, page 6, there is a section that talks about verifying vaccinations in several bullet points, which seem to suggest that schools would have the ability to request voluntary submission and documentation of COVID-19 vaccination status. It says you should use the same standard protocols that are used to collect and secure other immunization or other health status information from students. So it seems to me, based on the New York State guidance, there would be a path to at least receive voluntary vaccine information, provided that it's treated appropriately in terms of it being health information.
And that's important. If your child had a vaccination at their medical provider, all of our nurses have access to that New York State health information. So we can look it up on a child And it does say that we can voluntarily ask. The hard part is when you voluntarily ask, you irritate people. And that's okay to irritate people, but it causes that push me, pull you system. If we want to do that, we can. It's very simple. It's an opening piece of paperwork. But we're going to have the yeses and nos on both sides. And that's okay, but believe me, I will tell you, and I mean this just from experience, if all of a sudden your child came in and was identified in contact tracing, you're going to tell me whether or not they're vaccinated, because if they're vaccinated and they don't have symptoms, it's beneficial for you to tell me. Once you tell me, we would put that in, but it sets up that system where I've got to hope that something happens to maybe get some information from others where I may not have to from some. Either way, we can do whichever one. That's not a problem. A lot of the things the state said they will recommend on voluntary basis, that's no problem. The one thing they are firm about is they are strongly recommending indoor masking at this point, not outdoor masking, which I was surprised at. They say for like athletics, those big events, it should follow similarly to what you're doing in your buildings. They just weren't clear on if you're outside. And for me, I kind of use the Olympics as an example. The reason being is people masked in their intermediate or in the sidelines or when they're coming out, but when they performed, they took their masks off. It's mid-step. It's something middle. I don't know if people will go for that or not. The whole point is we must put into place something that's as preventative as possible. Whether people agree with it or not, that's the hard balancing point that the board's going to have to deal with. So just a couple other questions. COVID-19 screening. New York State guidance recommends screening testing. In other words, they actually would prefer if we would test on a regular basis. And honestly, we did that last year. Most people had consented. Some people, for their own reasons, said no. But for the most part, it wasn't that intrusive, and a lot of people availed themselves of that, and it went off without too much of a hit. The county is looking to try to continue that, and here's the reason. I believe also, the more potential data that they have that's of negative helps the entire community because the numbers go down. But right now, sometimes we're doing 169 tests and you have 10 people. Well, that's almost 16%, right? That's going to overinflate. That's why I don't believe you can just use the CDC metrics. You have to use a combination of metrics to sort of ferret out the differences of one just looking at one set of data. And it's not specific to our local. So that's a couple things. Will we be doing temperature screenings or questionnaire screenings? Personally, state doesn't recommend them. Honestly, 50% of our people complied. The other 50% didn't. Some of the people that complied didn't necessarily tell us everything truthfully, but it did help at certain points. My recommendation probably to the board is that we just put out the guidance. Parents, you're responsible to make sure before they come to school, you screen them for their own temperature and make sure they're not high. And in addition, you make sure they have no symptoms, otherwise keep them home and put it upon the parents. You do this. This is your partnership role. And if you send them, we know you're saying that they met all the criteria. Just like I think we might have to do that with staff. Even though I can do the screening with staff, I don't know why, if you come, I expect you to be healthy. If you have symptoms, I expect you to stay home. And well, I will tell you, most of our parents were pretty good about that. Most of our spread last year was not because of school. It was mostly because of something the parents did, or who they've met with, or who the kids came in contact away from school. But that doesn't mean we did not have some spread. We had some from BOCES to school, school to BOCES, and we had some from student to teacher and teacher to student. But it wasn't a lot. But during that whole time, we were also masked. So I don't know what's the right answer. I'm just trying to give you some of the information. Good hand washing, respiratory, we have that. That's pretty good. And we'll do all the education on that again. I think the kids understand that. Most of the parents always tell them to cough into their elbows and stuff. Will Horseheads still need to use a dedicated quarantine room? If a child is infectious while they're at school or suspected of it, they must be isolated and parents must immediately come and get them. The problem is some parents don't come and get them. That's going to be more of a heightened sense because we will be using the health department and local law enforcement if a child has to go home. Not to take the child home, but to go get the parent. The parent has an obligation to remove the child for the health and safety of everyone. And once we call, we can't have somebody just say, I'm not coming. We did have some of that last year. Most of it is very minimal, so we just want to be aware of that. But we will have space available for temporary isolation. But we will not be dedicating a room to it because we need the rooms for all the kids coming back. Facilities, improved ventilation. Mike and them, we have some of the best ventilation that we have. We've been improving it. He's done everything according to the state standards and state recommendations, and we were one of the first schools. Remote instruction, will instruction to students out on isolation quarantine look like? We were having a meeting today to talk about that. Really, if we're 100% in person, if a child had the flu and they stayed home for a week, they wouldn't get any remote instruction, they'd come back and they'd have to make up the work. A lot of times we're going to do that, but we are looking at some ways, because this could have extended time that somebody's out, that we can try to use its learning so that the child, if they're healthy, I mean, if a child's sick, they shouldn't be doing their work. They need to focus on getting better. But if they're quarantined because they're around somebody, but they're not sick and not showing symptoms, yeah, they can't be here. How can we assist that child staying as current as possible so that the return to school is a much less steeper climb? So that's some of the things we were talking about today. I think a couple dynamics came out of that about after-school tutoring and so forth that we're looking at it. But we have some of the tools that will help students in that situation. Will there be remote instruction? No. Our purpose is, as the state education department said, put the kids back in school. Now, that doesn't mean however anybody wants it, it's how they've said is the recommendation to go forward. So those are basically a lot of the key pieces. Just so that you know, up here is the guidance for COVID prevention at K through 12 schools. That's the CDC. That's been in my update so that you've seen it. COVID-19 guidance for safe schools. That's the American Association of Pediatrics. They're virtually close to the same. I don't know if there's a one-size-fits-all, but I do know that right now our first directive is from New York State is to look at their recommendations to follow. Then the board has to decide, are we following them until something else replaces them? The sooner I know, the sooner I can communicate it out. Just so that you know, the data piece, because people sometimes think I'm crazy and I don't know what's going on in the data, and I struggle with it too at times. I'm just putting up what I do every single day, and some people will say it's a waste of time. We were the only district that had to close because of a major outbreak. But we stayed closed when I don't believe we had to, but that was by order of the governor. I'm just showing you right here. This is basically an Excel document. That the first column you see with the yellows are always when the county does not update its numbers, so I have to do a rational projection between Friday and Monday. But this is all the data for the county for the whole past year. I know where we were, how many cases, how many recovered. Now, that's local. That's the big thing. We know some of the local issues. But you can't just look local, because we also have to look at the county data. The 3 counties here, this is Chemung, this is what happens. This is Steuben, and this is Broome. Broome has an advantage. They test 1,500 people a day. When college comes back, that gets up to 3,500. Well, if they have 100, it's 1.3. If we test 100 and we have 13, it's 13. So you have to sort of put it into context how much we're able to do. But ultimately what it does is this third column right here in green tells us what our infection percentage is at that point. And what happens is we've run in line. When it's red, we're above 3%. Notice, Broome's above 3%, Steuben's above 3%, we've been above 3%. We were higher, but we're starting to come down, and now they're starting to go up. Notice, college just came back. but I expect their number will go down because they have a far greater amount that they test every single day at the college, which will automatically, if there's no spread, will bring the number down. But just so you know, that's the New York State data. That is usually within 1 day of accurate data to the county, which can be 1 to 3 days behind depending on the weekend. But then if you take into consideration this column right here is the CDC's data. Notice the CDC tends to paint a much darker position, red. And by their rules, if it's yellow and red, we're to go to red. That's closure. Here's where we were, according to the CDC guidance, almost all of last year. Notice we're in red. Does everybody want to be closed? That's why if you take the CDC guidance, the orange column is Johns Hopkins guidance from COVID Act. They're usually about 1 day behind. So I have the CDC guidance, which is a national. I have Johns Hopkins, which is also a national, but has much more detail in their data. I have our county, which is local from the state, and I have our county's data from our county. And all of that is put into a mathematical equation of assigning a 4-point scale to each number in low, medium, and high into each of the 4 quadrants. And that's what this does. And I've color-coded it to match. So currently, just so that you know, here's the summer. Here's where we are now. You can see it's trending up. But the CDC just 2 days ago said we were red. If I look at our data in totality, we were in low, we were in high, low transmission, we're in medium, we just hit medium, moderate transmission by bringing all the data into focus. That's what I said, because we have the ability to look at local data as well. I'm not a doctor. I've sent this to the health department. They haven't said anything against it. I don't think they'll adopt it because they have a rigid structure with the state. But that's giving our best picture of what would help guide me. If I know that I'm using this data, I'd probably put up a chart. In blue, high, medium, low, low, medium, high. And in blue, most likely masking and all of those, I'd probably put up, if the state allowed me, masking optional. In yellow, low, medium, high, I'd probably have some masking optional, but as I'm approaching substantial, I might shift to masking in place or masking indoors, optional when you're seated. But you see, you can do that. The state is going to give some levity there. I just need to know where's my range. When you get into substantial, masking indoors. High substantial, maybe masking indoors and outdoors. Low red, masking indoors and outdoors, but medium red, high red, we better be prepared to go to remote. All of last year, according to this, we only got to red 1 day, October 31st. And that was right when we were coming to the end when the governor put us in orange. Just so that you know, here's all the dates. Here's all the data, and you'll see that one red one. I'm not any rocket scientist. I'm not saying I have a cure. I've just tried to put a mathematical equation to give reason, and so it's not subjective. Kevin.
So your aggregate number you use here is to each of those 4.
It gives equal weight to each of the 14 measurements that are in red. There are 4 that are on the positivity rate and 12 that are on the cases, whether they're based on 100,000 or base, because the cases are really what matter. You can be 10% positive and only have 1 case if you only tested 10 people. Do you see why we put more weight on the number of cases versus the positivity? Because the CDC puts it on the positivity most. And if you have 10 cases, but it gets you to 100 cases per 100,000, you're at red no matter what. But it doesn't take into consideration the fact that the CDC only goes by nucleic acid tests, which are the deep nose, the PCRs, where the county and everything else in the state uses PCRs, Binex, as well as, what's the Abbott? Those are PCR too, but rapid. And what happens is, all that data in the CDC is excluded. So if, as an example, CDC gets 100 PCR tests from Chemung County, 10 of them are positive. That's a 10% rate that they're going to put up. Chemung County, for the same time, does 1,000 antigen or Abbott tests. None of them are positive. Doesn't count. If you put the 1,000 with the 100 together for 1,100 tests and 10 of them are positive, you're looking at a 1% infection rate. Not taken into consideration whatsoever. That's the problem with data. Can be whatever anybody wants data to look at. I'm trying to remove what the national wants the data to look at. But in order for me to do that, I would put that into a plan, and the board has to approve that plan. No matter what, before, like last year, boards did not have to approve the plan. Okay? And that was because they were by executive order, they were ordered by the state. You had no legal authority to go against those plans. These plans right now, the board eventually will have to finalize and approve, because you have to give me the legal authority to do what's in that plan. Like I said, the vast majority, wiping down desks, 3 feet distance, those are the easy ones. Ultimately going to come down to the masking. I don't think you'll end up having much say in that. But in case they don't say anything, I still need the board to tell me what we're going to do, because I have to be ready to open September 8th. Is it 8th? Did I get it right? 7th? 8th?
7th.
Somewhere around. I have been asked, are you going to delay the opening? No. We open the day after our opening scheduled day after Tuesday on Labor Day. And I think that's what the board has directed me. And remember, the board gave me a directive, I think back in March. I must follow the recommendations or guidance of the state. Unless that's withdrawn or a new plan is approved, I'm still obligated to do that. But I wanted the board to know that. So if you want to go in a different direction, you have to rescind that. Because otherwise it puts me in a position with the board that I have to do what you've told me to do right now. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. All of this is all tied together. That's one of the reasons why they said boards now must approve the plan. We have been advised point blank by council as well. Boards are to approve the plan, because you're the legislative authority, unless the state comes in and mandates something. But if that's the case, you've already given me my directive. I've got to follow the state mandate. Okay? So that's some of the data. Did I miss anything? Tony, Katie? Where does the board like to go now? Because I'm done talking.
I think it would be important just to hear the opinions from everybody on the board as to, the masks, as to, kind of where we've been, where we're going, some of the elements that Tom brought up. So I'm just curious as to what's going through all of your heads, as to from everything that we've heard and everything that we know now. Anybody want to start?
Don't everybody jump.
All right, Doug, thank you.
I guess I'll step into the fray first here. So 2 months ago, the district was ready to make indoor masking optional due to some interesting communications at the state level, to say the least, and the county also seemingly on board with what was then the new guidance at the time. I think we have the authority at the local level to determine our own plan based on the guidance. Yes, we do want to take the CDC guidance into consideration for sure. But just 2 months ago, we were talking about indoor masking being optional. I think there's enough data out there to show that all along we were told that our schools are safest, and partially might have been due to the masking, but that Children get it children, generally speaking, do not catch the virus. If they do, it's a very mild form of it. And the recommendation also was fully vaccinated people do not need to wear masks at all. So I'm a little torn. If we have got, are we going to have students within 3 feet of each other, or can we maintain 3 feet? I guess would be one information.
You can never guarantee. I mean, on buses, we're going to have students within 3 feet. In the hallways, have you seen the high school or BOCES campus? They always go someplace. But for the most part, I think if you talk to students and say, hey, you've got to keep the distance, they try to. It's easier at the elementary schools. It gets harder when you get into the secondary schools.
Right. Thanks. So I think if we, so CDC is now saying down to 3 feet is fine, although now they're going with universal masking. If we can't maintain 3 feet, I guess universal masking universal masking in that space might make more sense. Outside of that, I don't know that we're going to prevent a lot of spread in the schools among children. If we are keeping adults separated from students, generally speaking, by 6 feet, we've got a mitigation strategy there that should lower infection rates. I guess I would like to see something along the lines of the June 5th email that was sent to parents and guardians, where indoor masking would be strongly encouraged. Vaccinated people do not need to wear masks in schools.
Mr. Johnson, you're referring to that major debacle from the state where they said we could, and then on Sunday they took it back, so it's on the state. They took it away. We were never authorized at that point.
Right, but at that moment,
I agree with you.
At that moment of time, we had local discretion. Mm-hmm. And as a district, we made the decision that we're going to follow what was then supposed to be the new state and perhaps county guidance or directives or what have you. If we have the local control at this point, I'd like to see something more along that line than universal, especially without regard to vaccination status. And I know that there are studies in science out there that say vaccinated people can spread the virus, especially perhaps this Delta variant, but I still think it's on the very low side of things. And I personally would like to see more of an incentive to vaccinate. And if we go universal masking in schools, adults, children, what is the carrot? What is the incentive for vaccinations? So I think on all the other issues, I think cleaning and buses, we got to follow the federal guidance, or sorry, federal order on that. So I don't see any room for discretion there. But the cleaning, the education, the quarantining, contact tracing, I'm good with testing in the schools on a voluntary basis. So I think everything else probably pretty much similar to last year, except, 5 days a week in person. And I would keep the masking to as little as possible that would be supportable by science.
Can I ask you just to follow up real quick? You know how I said if I had my way and it was acceptable having it, you wear your mask when you're moving, but when you sit down and you're 3 feet apart, you take your mask off. Does that sound like the middle ground that you're trying to say, hey, that would be better than full masking? Or
yes.
Yeah. Because I know our lobbying group is putting that in up at Albany right now, because we had that meeting last week, and a lot of people gravitated around it that you can be unmasked in a lunchroom and 3 feet apart. So why couldn't you be in the classroom? It hasn't gotten any traction, but at least people heard it.
Well, talking to my high schooler from last year, in her words, there was no social distancing in the hallways. So, yes, I could support masks in the hallways for a limited period of time, but try and minimize it to the extent that science will actually support.
And you just brought up a good part. One of the things I heard from the state level is even if the governor did it, it's not. We have heard the recommendation would not be indefinitely. It would be for a period of time, and it would have to be reviewed by them if they put something in, which was a lot better than, no, this is what you're doing and I'm not talking to you. Actually, for the people at home, we'll just check. Well, that's not good.
You have Shayla's right there, too.
One of the things, Tom, that you sent out with that guidance that you put out, had a link for guidance for COVID prevention from the CDC.
Yes.
And it was that chart.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
the one that I was talking about that I've sort of modified, but I tried to follow its parameters with a final determination.
if we are to truly take the politics out of it, I don't see how we're talking about all these elements, and I believe a chart like this gives us that comprehensive nature. I think that question then leads to what data you're following to determine which zone we are in, but none of us here are of medical professionals, and we agree that, at least in my opinion, that the CDC might be looking at information that might be considered too strict and then causes too many restrictions on our kids. In my opinion, once we as a board determine what data we're following, I believe a chart is exactly what for me, there's no better middle ground, and I'm not looking at it for middle ground. If things get to a red state, if things get to a super high infection, we can't not do mitigation efforts, which does include masks, but we can't just always simply focus on masks too. Screenings. One of the questions I had for you is, I saw in the CDC guidance not to do temperature screenings anymore. Did you get any kids? You were doing it all year long. Were kids sent to school over that 100-degree?
Yeah. We did get some, especially on our transportation. We always had to do a secondary check because they may have been on a bus in a coat for an hour or so. We did have some errors where somebody was sent home. Parents were upset because I know I sent my kid and they did do the right thing, but every temperature came back that we had to. That was the guidance. I will tell you, for the most part, coming into buildings, I don't believe we saw many, if any, whatsoever. Remember, they're coming from a cold exterior into a warm exterior getting temperature. We had to check. We were meeting them at the car, and then we had to meet them inside. It's not a great system.
Right.
If it's an individual, like I'll use the sheriff's office or downtown, they get a good response. They make you come in, they make you wait, and then they have this one that you put your head to, and if it's anywhere close, they make you wait 10 minutes, you do it again. I can't do that with 4,000 kids. That's the problem.
And nor should you if we're in a blue or if we there designate a zone. I think we're talking about what is the correct reaction versus an overreaction. And I don't see how any other mechanism other than a zoning type of parameter then puts to that. And I think that's where additional conversation is necessary. What data do you follow? What constitutes what color zone? And therein, what do we say we do in each of those zones? But this is too new of a problem to prescribe a one-size-fits-all. And I believe that what we could do best as a school district is respond to the data and to the current situation that we're in.
Yeah.
And I think to do that would need a charting
I think
system.
that's where, like, the data I was showing you helps me find that. It's just like, if I knew that data, 2 nationals, 1 state, 1 county, and 1 state county, and our county, that seems to give us a flow of what's really going on. And it sort of maps the time when we were in the orange zone. We were higher. We weren't as high as they thought. And when we were coming out of that orange zone for us, when we got placed into it, that's the one time we hit red. But there was never an adjustment after that. But if that's the case, then what happens is there won't be any more zoning in New York State, those orange, yellow. But the zoning actually is in that CDC chart. And what happens is we've tried to take it so it's not just 4 quadrants, there's 3 quadrants under each. So there's 12 options that you can go up the scale and come down. Sort of like with us at a week's time. Like on the data that I showed you, on July 5th was our lowest point during the whole year. The calculated transmission rate for all that data source was 0.30. Each week after has steadily gone up to it's at 1.21 as of Friday. Now we're in yellow. The expectation from what I'm hearing, and I can't predict it, but if it keeps going for the next 6 weeks, we will get up to orange at the highest. I don't think we'll ever break red because you have to be very high to get there. But it tells us it almost doubled in 2 weeks. In 2 more weeks, it's almost doubled again. In 2 more weeks, I'm hoping that doesn't double, because if it does, we're at 2.4, 2.5, and we're in the middle of the orange zone, getting ready to go into red right as soon as we open school. And if it doubles again, it can't double. It goes into red. And right when we open, we might have to close. And I don't think we are going to. I just don't think it goes up that fast. You can already see some trends, like at the local level, that, people see the county health department. And they saw yesterday 31 new cases. What they forget is that's Saturday's cases, Sunday's cases combined. And what happened on Friday, because Monday is a data dump, where before they were doing Saturday and Sunday. I will probably suggest the health department needs to continue doing that Saturday and Sunday, because it really sends our numbers at the CDC level, if you took it that way, up, but the CDC doesn't get it from the county that way. They get it differently. Long story short, I think you can develop a matrix where it might not be screening, but we did sample testing. And if we put out consent for everybody so that we know who wants to, we can at least do that consent testing, that if we get into the yellow, maybe we do voluntary 5%. But when we get into orange, maybe it's a mandatory 10% of those that have consented. A lot of our parents were very good. They liked it. The big thing is, potentially this year, we might be able to do diagnostics. Your child comes in, they have symptoms. Please don't send them if we're in that way just to get the test, because there are also ways that we might be able to get a test out to you to help out, because it could potentially rule it out. But we don't know if the county is going to allow that yet. But all of those are good mitigation efforts.
I think, just in summation, as far as being a school board member, I react, or I make decisions based on an eye contact test, and my contact test to any parent of the school district would be, we're doing the correct amount of mitigation standards to keep our students safe and to keep instructions 5 days a week. And the matrix is the best method, in my opinion, that meets those criteria.
It's at least objective, as objective as it can be,
Kevin,
whether it's factual.
Before you pass off the mic, I'm just want to get everybody's opinion then on, you talked a lot about the data and the matrix and everything. What about the masking requirement?
The masking requirement should be in place at a high level. The ability to say that we can go without masking, and that masking therein has, that matrix is what, in my opinion, allows for the best judgment to be exercised. If we're in full red and we're still operating, which we all agree is our best option, is to keep 5 days a week, we're masking, we're masking from the moment they come in to the moment they leave. If that's high red, if we're looking and we're operating in a yellow to orange parameter, then orange should necessitate a lesser step, yellow and below. We already know that we're going to be masking if a kid rides a bus. So we've already consented that we have to have some level of masking. Where on that spectrum of masking should we do? If we're not doing it based on numbers, then it's a disservice to anyone, regardless of their opinion.
Kevin, if I can just ask, what about state ed saying at this time they're highly recommending full indoor masking, not outdoor, but indoor masking at the start of the school year.
They really cared, Tom, then they would make it a mandate.
Officially, they can't make a mandate. They've done what they can because
If it is in our hands, then it's gone from someone at Albany to someone here.
Yeah.
And I have to support that. I'm glad because as somebody who's worked at the health department for 10 months, we were that only line where people could talk. No one can call the governor. No one can call Zucker or anyone like that. They don't answer their emails.
They just call us.
Yes. And, well, they call us, they call the health department too. And that, at least we are more accountable to the parents and to everybody. And so if it is in our hands, then it's a recommendation. And that's where I think our discretion comes in.
And so the board knows, the county executive has been very supportive. We've talked to him, the county health director. They're just as flummoxed as everybody else. We've even asked, hey, you guys have the ability to put it in. If you really talk about politics, that ain't going to happen. But they have advised us we should follow the recommendations from state ed.
Dan.
Well, where I start is, that what we talked so much about last year was keeping the schools open and getting the kids back to school, right? And so I think my first priority is to try to make sure that the schools are open 5 days a week for in-person learning, which, as Dr. Douglas mentioned, we intend to do. And then secondly, it's safety of all those who are in our schools, but most importantly, the students. So with those two as my key goals, I believe strongly that we should follow the recommendation of the experts. I wouldn't, as a school board member, begin to think that I know better than the experts at the CDC or the American Academy of Pediatrics. And so if they're recommending mask wearing because of what's happening right now, and 2 months ago, maybe it was different, but with the Delta variant and with what we have today, that's the recommendation. And then the state is passing that recommendation along. I would be in favor of acting in accordance with that recommendation. I think, it's not to say that I don't certainly understand the concerns that were raised tonight by members of the community, and I applaud them for coming and raising those. But as was said, I think for everyone who spoke against masks, there'd be someone who would speak in favor of masks. And we have to sort of make sure we're representing the full cross-section of the community. As Kevin said, we already have to wear masks on buses. I come from my own experience of having 5 children in K through 12 classrooms through the past year who wore masks. My experience of wearing a mask to work myself, my experience of seeing my wife who's in the health field wear a mask every day. And, I think it's frankly a small step or price to pay for if that helps us prevent one child from getting sick or keep transmission rates down and keep schools open, then I think that's the way we should go. So I am in favor. Now, I also think it's going to become a moot point based upon the state mandate. If at some point our county looks substantially different from others, Delta goes a certain way in some geographies and it's different here, and if data supports it, high school, maybe we get to a point where the high school, because kids are vaccinated, they don't have to be masked or something like that. So I think over time we might be able to hone the position, but my going in would be to act in accordance with the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatric recommendations on masks. And then, otherwise I would also act in consistent with the guidance. I don't think the temperature screening would be required. The state isn't saying it's required, and it had questionable, usefulness. Testing, voluntary testing, the other areas that, it sounds like there's sort of agreement around, I'm consistent with. Masks obviously is the most concerning. I would think, I have seen, it's interesting, I'm sure many others have seen that there are masks that are clear. Right? I know there's a significant concern around young children being able to see each other's faces. Maybe the district could buy a supply of those clear masks that enable the viewing of of the face. There may be some things we could look at there to try to address those concerns, but specifically, I would go in accordance with the guidance.
I can see Mr. Coughlin's already probably researching already. There is a difficulty with the clear masks just because they do a lot of fogging. But it's hard. I mean, no matter what. I've seen some where they put I don't condone it, but it's a whole thing. But what it is it's like a bubble over your face, but they have holes in the bottom. It's not a mask.
Yeah,
but I understand your point there. One of the questions I had, Mr. Christmas, is you're not just CDC, but you're really saying that we should be following what state ed is saying to keep CDC and stuff in there, because our regulations don't come from CDC or AAP. It would end up coming from the state education department, which says the same thing that you have just said, is follow these.
Yeah, the point I'm making is, and I'm looking at it, the state guidance on page 8, where it talks about wearing masks, the first paragraph starts, the CDC has recently updated its guidance on masks. So the state is simply pointing to the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics and saying the state believes that districts should act in accordance with that. So that's why I mentioned them specifically, but it becomes through virtue of the state guidance.
It doesn't sound like you're too opposed to, sort of like what Mr. Adams said, is that even if we were doing that, and if there's some adjustments, or like you say, like if we're in low, and this would be one platform when it steps up to here, it might be masks in the hallways, not 3 feet apart. When it gets to orange, it might be masks indoor, things like that. You're not adverse to that if we have some levity.
I would say, I'd be willing to discuss that, but I think it depends on where we are. None of us, frankly, unfortunately, know where we'll be 3 months from now, in terms of cases and variants and what the guidance will be. I hope that we just have school open 5 days a week. If that means we have to have masks on the whole day to enable that, I know there were opportunities for mask breaks, for example, right? Distance the students and have a break. Maybe we can add in more of those to the schedule. So I'm encouraging finding ways to address the concerns, but I'm also in favor of following the recommendation. And if at some point the cases are such that maybe the recommendation allows for some flexibility, yeah, I'd be willing to talk about that.
Okay.
Tom?
So earlier you asked, Tom, in a perfect world, what would be your choice? Well, understand that this is a very polarizing topic, and being very, very close to the healthcare industry myself, I'll tell you, in a perfect world, 2 words come to mind: trust and choice. So in a perfect world, I would love for us to sit back, to trust our parents and give our kids and their families the choice. However, then it comes down to what type of autonomy are we going to be given to even make these decisions? And being in the healthcare industry, I believe strongly in the data. Like Doug mentioned, I would love to see some sort of incentivization for vaccines. I think they're that important. I really do. At the same time, however, I will say this: if the worst conversation that we're having is that we're starting with 5 days of school, full instruction, no remote for our students, that's a much better place than we were a year ago. So at least we know that our kids are going to get full instruction 5 days a week in school. And it will be up to us to figure out what that's going to look like based on the data, based on the science, and frankly, based on the experts. While I'm close to the healthcare industry, I am certainly not a doctor. We're not doctors. None of us are experts. I think depending on what the state guidance looks like, we may be forced to make some pretty important, pretty difficult decisions, but that's kind of what we signed up for. But in a perfect world, listen, I can't wait until we get to the day where we can just sit back and trust our people and give them a choice. I just don't know if we're going to be afforded that opportunity, at least presently. So, those are my thoughts.
Thanks. Warren or Brian?
I think Mr. Christmas is far more eloquent than I could be in explaining the rationale, but I am 100% for masks. I believe, as Mr. Casey just said, if our choice last year was 5 days a week in masks, we would have jumped at that in a heartbeat. I believe that whatever data we're talking about with COVID is old data because this is a variant now and we don't know how the variant is different from its predecessor. So if our objective is to be open 5 days a week, in-person learning, I would go with the CDC and the pediatrics and support that.
Thanks. Brian?
I think Warren summed it up very well. Dan did a great job of summarizing it. I think the key is 5 days a week in school, and we have to keep safety as one of our top concerns. That is no question what we need to do for the community and the kids. So I am of the belief, too, we need to follow the CDC, the state ed at this point. If they're saying mask, I'm going with the mask. I think we'll get much more direction next week with the new governor. And hopefully there are some data-based decisions so we're not stuck in the same mode for 12 months or 9 months. And if a county or a community can relax it a little bit, then so be it, if that's what they determine. But at this point, I'm going to let the decisions be made by them. They're the experts.
Okay, thank you. So my opinion, I agree. I think at this point, we need to go with the guidance from the state, and if the state is giving the guidance that we go back to school with masks, then that's what we do. We've heard from our legal advisors that, it's not in our best interest to, from a liability standpoint, to not follow the guidance from the state. As board members, we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to minimize liability, but also to keep all of our students and staff safe. I know, it is hard, and I do sympathize with the community members that came tonight and spoke, and it was definitely heart-wrenching hearing the comments and hearing the concerns and hearing the issues. And I know that's not easy, but on the flip side, unfortunately, we didn't have any people that came to smoke or that came and spoke pro masks, but we did get several emails and several communications that came in from those parents as well. And, just to kind of paraphrase some of those concerns is, our younger children are not even eligible to be vaccinated. So, right now, 12 and over, there is a choice, and there is a choice by the student, there is a choice by the parent. But under 12, we don't have that choice right now. And so, I think, and to go in and say masks are optional, and even as a parent, I know when my kids were younger, if I said, okay, you need to wear a mask at school because you're not vaccinated, they go to school or they see other people that aren't going to have their masks on, and they're going to take them off. Kids are going to be kids, and they're going to want to do what their friends are doing. And if we're making it optional, I think we run into the situation where we create unsafe environments and unhealthy environments from a emotional, social, and physical well-being of our children. So I'm in favor of keeping masks, and again, we'll get more guidance from the state within the next week, hopefully. But right now, the guidance is to be masks. I think our number one priority is to have our schools open 5 days a week, and I'm really excited. I know all of our kids are excited to be back in school every day, and our teachers are excited for that. The last thing I'd want to see happen is to be open for a week and then all of a sudden our numbers jump up because we didn't put a mask mandate in place, and then all of a sudden we're back to square one and we're closed again. That is definitely not in the best interest of anybody in the district. So I'd rather be safe And, if there is a way, kind of a middle ground to be able to say, yes, when you're moving, when you're in the hallways, when you're moving from classroom to classroom, obviously on the buses, we don't have a choice. But if there's the ability to say in motion, you wear masks, masks for motion, and then when you're stationary, you have your masks off, and so if there's the ability to do that. And I also think in the future, just talking about, I'll be vocal. I am pro-vaccine, I don't want to make any of this political or anything, but if there is an opportunity in the future to be able to say, if a certain percentage of your building is vaccinated, then you get to the point where you can lessen some of those requirements. And again, I don't know if the state will come and say that. I don't know if we'll have the ability to do something like that in the future. But then that gives us a little bit more. And then it does become more of a choice, once everybody is eligible. Right now, not everybody's eligible. So I feel like it needs to be a one-size-fits-all, and that one-size-fits-all is masks.
My one thing on that last piece on vaccination, I'd leave that to the state. I would not recommend the board enter into that unless the state put that out.
Okay.
Just because of the fact that's a medical situation that
Yep.
we should not be putting our parents or students being in that enticing moment, and then
Yeah.
they can come back on the board and said,
that's
well, you said this and you did this to me.
Yeah, definitely understood. A couple of the other points that you brought up, as far as screenings, I don't know. I mean, you get variations in thermometers and variation going from cold air into warm air and stuff like that. So I don't really know how beneficial the screenings were. I think it just goes back to common sense and urging our parents, if your child is sick, keep them home. So making sure that we're continuing to remind parents of that. So, I agree. I don't think we need the screenings. Testing, I'm all in favor of testing. If we have the ability and access to be able to do the tests, and we can be, doing a certain percentage every single week, and testing students every day based on consent of their parents, I think, I would love to have that information just from my own household, and so if we're able to do that, particularly if we're in environments where it's a little bit higher risk, and, when we get into the sports and stuff like that, and there's a lot more contact, a lot more, socialization and to be able to do mingling, to be able to have that option as well. Obviously that's a voluntary thing as well. We have to have consent to be able to do that. But, we did have quite a few parents that did consent to do that last year. And if we can continue that, it helps.
That was an avenue that did have benefits out of it. I mean, no matter what, we could have been quarantining a lot more, especially towards the end, because our testing did find some people that did not even have an indication just by random testing that they were even positive. And that was able to help minimize some of the issues through contact tracing. The hard part there is about those high-risk areas. We have sports starting next week. You've heard the music in the background, which is good because we're finally able to hear music. But there's potential issues with that, and how close, how far apart. If we can be outside, it's always better than indoors. Those are privileges. Field band, sports. The question is do we put in a mandatory testing policy? Do we put in mandatory masking right now for practice until we find out much more? I just don't know what the right answer is. I'm just going to tick people off. That's all it is. It sounds like the board's saying or not going to end up taking away the directive that I and my team follow state recommendations or guidance from whether it's the governor, whether it's DOH or state ed. If that's the case, the direction is set until something else changes or the board changes it. If that's the case, then the only other thing, because there is no direction in the state on athletics extracurricular, and we'll look and see if there's other things that we need direction on.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at. I mean, from what I've heard, I think
I'll need to reaffirm that with the board members that are here. Marianne is out. Shayla had to leave for, I think, work. But I need to know, because if I'm not to follow that directive and we're going to come up with something else, I also have to put that out that we will wait for the guidance, or we will have something developed by the 1st. But by the 2nd, I have to have a finalization.
Okay.
I would need to know from the board, because the board's already voted. So the board would either have to motion to overturn that recommendation from whatever the date is, I just don't know what it is, or to just say, we're not doing anything, and I've got to continue on because I am under direction to follow the state agencies.
Right.
Is that how the board remembers it, I think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the vote that the last vote that we've had is for the district to follow the guidance of the state.
I don't agree. That's what the resolution was. Back then, we were dealing with legal mandates from the governor and the State Department of Health, and the vote or the consensus at that time was to follow what was stated to the letter in those Department of Health guidelines that were made, had the force and effect of law by the executive order of the governor, which is now lapsed and expired. These are recommendations, pure and simple, from the State Education Department. We can follow them or we can't. There are consequences for each path, of course, but I don't believe that's what our resolution was.
Well, if that's not the case, then you need to give me direction tonight with a vote. But I do believe that the statement was, we follow, and I don't know if Nancy's here, if you can look at that, the minutes, or Candy, but it was to follow the state guidance and even to update our following if the guidance changed, because that's what precipitated, I think, as you said, Mr. Johnson, the June 5th memo. I didn't need board because they were going and we put something out, and then unfortunately the state changed again and did the whipsaw, but that was based on that resolution, yes.
So just so we can be clear, then I would say let's put it out for a vote tonight. Dan?
I actually, so, I'm not opposed to voting necessarily, but one, as you just yourself said, I think it may all become moot here. And so do we really need a vote between now and next week when you think that might be mandated by the state? What would be the point of that would be a question. Two, if we're going to actually, I would expect, if we're being asked as a board, I would want to see, okay, here's our plan, here's our, what are we voting on, right? And so is there a document, is there a plan? What are we being asked to approve?
You would
more clarity.
Yep. You would be giving me guidance. Do I follow the state education department's recommendations or not, which is the state agency that is telling us we should. Our plan is in place. There would be modifications to that plan according to the new recommendations of the state, such as what you said, the CDC, the AP. But in general, the plan's already been up and at the state. I would bring back a final plan for you to authorize once we have that direction.
So our next meeting is September 1st.
Yep.
Do you need, so we hopefully will have more direction from our new governor by then. So do you need, for you to move forward to be able to communicate out to the district, do you need us to give you that thumbs up or thumbs down tonight, or can we wait until September 1st?
I think you can buy some time. I do believe the people of the community need to know what the potential expectation is, and I think I can at least put out, just like we said, that we plan on being 5 days a week, 3 foot distance on buses. Most of our safety and hygiene plan is in there. I can probably put in there, currently there's no recommendation for screening. However, this is yet to be determined, and I can say that right now it's heavily indicated that there would be potential masking at the state level, but we don't know. We will finalize that once an announcement has come, or that the board gives me final direction on September 1st. I have no problem doing that. That finds the middle ground if that's what you would like as well. The longer you wait, the problem is there's less time to address anything that we may have missed.
Warren. For the people at home.
I don't know. I think we have an obligation to the parents for their own personal planning. I mean, we heard some people here tonight saying that if the mask mandate is in place, they're going to make different plans for their children. And I don't think it's fair to those people to wait to September 1. I think we have an obligation to make a position known. This is the position of the board. This is what we believe. and take the vote. And I just think we have an obligation to help the parents plan in advance and let them know. I mean, and if the vote is no mask, I think that also means that parents that want their children to be masked and are pro-mask are going to have to make plans also. So I think we have an obligation to be proactive here and do it as far in advance as we possibly can.
Kevin?
Warren, on that, being the only, I believe, board member who wasn't here last year, I would like an opportunity to vote on what, and the way it's coming down to me is that we either fully go with the CDC guidance or we go back to Tom to develop another plan.
I would just amend it, that we follow state education.
State education,
guidance, which does the same
which
thing,
points to CDC.
because we don't follow CDC, we follow what the state
Right.
says. They just co-opted CDC.
And the vote would then if voted against that, it would direct you to come up with a plan as far as what we looked. If we said, no, we're not going to follow state ed, then it would be incumbent upon you and your team to come up with amendments to the safety plan.
No, it would come up to the board, would have to have another discussion on what you want in that plan.
Okay.
As far as the requirements. If you don't want masking, I just need you to tell me the what. I can put in the how.
Okay.
And the reason being is because ultimately you'll have to approve any plan you put into place. I also have to provide you the legal indemnification piece, as Katie had talked about, that is a risk for the district and individual board members.
So I think that would be the specifics of the vote.
It will give me time to do a lot of that for you guys.
For September 1st, coming back by September 1st. I think, I agree with Warren. We should take a vote on that.
I agree. I think we do owe it to our community and to our parents to have a formal view as to where we are headed, and whether the mandate comes from the governor or not. We have the recommendation from the state. So I'll put it out there. So the recommendation right now would be for us as a district to continue or to follow the recommendations of the state education department, who then in turn, follows CDC guidance, but ours is coming from the state education guidance. So it would be for us to continue to follow. So can I have
I
a
would
motion?
second the motion there.
Okay. Well, do I need a?
You made the motion.
Oh, okay. I thought I needed another. All right. So all those in favor?
Wait.
Oh.
You still have to open up for discussion.
Oh, right. So any more
Warren was gonna say
discussion?
something.
Okay, so the motion is to follow the state guidance. Any questions or further discussion that we need on this before we take a vote?
I would say and ask for a roll call vote as a member, as a potential situation of record.
Okay. All right. Any questions or discussion? Doug?
Yeah, I'm going to oppose this just because I think, not that I think the SED guidance is out to lunch or anything or wrong per se. I think we should exercise our own local control and make our own decisions based on guidance from federal and state sources.
Okay. So nay for Doug. Tom?
No, I'd be in favor of it. I will say this, I think I agree with Dan here. I'm not sure if there's a need for a vote if you're just going to do what we asked you to do to begin with. But if we're going to vote, as much as, I sometimes disagree with the decisions that are made, I just have to fall to the experts and trust their advice.
Okay, thank you. Warren? Dan?
Record state that when I understand the state guidance that we're discussing to be that health and safety guide for the 2021-2022 school year put out by the New York State Education Department dated August 2021. So with respect to that document and the motion as to whether we would vote in favor of following the recommendations in that document, I would vote yes.
And to follow up, that is the document that we will prepare a final plan for, of anything to come back if that's the decision of the board.
Kevin?
To be clear, I've never suggested that we make masking optional. What I'm in favor of is a matrix-based approach based on the positivity or case level, and upon that, that would be a mandate or not. So I vote nay.
Brian?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes as well. So that is five yeses and two nays, so the motion
And
passes.
2 are absent.
2 are absent. Right, but we still have the majority, 5 yays.
So at this point, the board is saying, prepare our plan based on the State Education Department's recommendation, unless something changes and mandated from the governor. And then I will tell you, I will try to put that plan together with that sort of data matrix and matrix for if they give us latitude, because I think everybody's in agreement. If we have some latitude,
Right.
that would be wise.
Right.
I will try to prepare that as swiftly as possible. I'm trying to take some vacation because I haven't all summer long. It's the worst time in the world. But I've got to fix some things. But we will be working on it over the next 2 weeks.
The one recommendation I have, just from a communication standpoint, is, because it was mentioned tonight in the community comments about quarantining and things like that. I think we need to really put out more communication about what does quarantining mean. If you're vaccinated, if you're not vaccinated, if you come in contact, if you don't, I think there's just so much confusion out there about when somebody would have to quarantine and for how long and based on their status. And not that I want it to go out so it encourages people to vaccinate or not vaccinate, but I think there's just a lot of confusion around that. And I think it would be beneficial if we had some sort of document if people want to go to the health department to see that document or wherever that is, but be able to point parents to the right place and be able to very well articulate what it really means. And
it is something that's a challenge, but I know Caitlin's here and works with our health department on that. The hard part about it is we do not quarantine. We cannot interpret what the health department's going to do, but if we can have sort of maybe a one-page guide from them that they say this is what quarantining is, we could put it up as an access point on our website.
Or even, I know there was confusion last year when there was a positive at the high school, and then the students that had come in contact with that were called to the nurse's office, and then they had to go home, and there was confusion as to, well, why do I have to go home, but this person doesn't, and it was because that person was vaccinated. And somebody. Yeah. So I think, again, there's just a lot of confusion, and if we can just kind of start off the school year with, this is what all of this means, and this is what you can expect. And again, that's all going to also depend on if we end up doing testing, frequently.
One of the follow-ups, I just need a little guidance from the board, is because in that they do indicate for high-risk areas in sports, we do have local controls, sort of whether or not we are going to continue them or not. I do not believe it's the board's expectation that we close high-risk sports at this point, as they were identified previously, because officially there's no high-risk sports anymore, except they reference them: football, volleyball, cheer, lacrosse, and so forth. I can tell you, throughout last year, we mitigated. They did say that sports and those types of activities should similarly model, I believe. Dan, do you have that there? Similarly model what the expectations are on the premises, but it doesn't necessarily always differentiate between indoors and outdoors. I would take a rational approach. If you're outdoors, try to maintain 6 feet unless you're in competition. If you're on the sidelines and can't maintain, you should be masked like we are indoors. But if you can maintain that distance, that's the sort of the enticement to do what you're supposed to do. What's the board's thought on athletics? Because unfortunately, we won't get guidance before they start. Dan, do you have that by any chance? I know you were looking at it. See if they see something about masking and participation. My computer's acting up, so I apologize.
Page 9 of the SED guidance says, masks are recommended for school events and athletics while indoors, per the CDC.
So indoors, outdoors, we should highly recommend keep your distance as much as possible at this point, unless we get different guidance. Is that fair enough to say?
Right, so then it would just impact indoor sports right now.
Right now. Okay.
But is that an exception to the resolution we've just?
I don't know, because
it says the CDC recommends that schools maintain at least 3 feet of physical distance between students within classrooms, combined with indoor mask wearing.
Does it say where practical or where it can't be, should be wearing masks?
When it's not possible to maintain a physical distance of at least 3 feet, such as when schools cannot fully reopen while maintaining these distances, it is important to layer multiple other prevention strategies, such as cohorting.
Yeah, we will. If we cohort, we will be closed. I do not believe that is the board's intent, to cohort and go to 2 days a week.
Right, but can you go back to what it specifically says about sports?
All it talked about was masks and athletics, and I think it probably is due to physical education.
We will also have to remind anybody in extracurriculars it's a privilege, it's not a right. And then on top of it, if they wish to participate, they will adhere to the school district's doctrine.
It does say in the guidance that high-risk sports extracurricular activities should be virtual or canceled in areas of high community transmission unless all participants are fully vaccinated. So
Which
that's
we
what
are
we're
not at high, but we don't know their vaccinations.
But what we're saying as a board is following this, that if we go into high, you are to activate this.
Yep.
Okay.
If they're not vaccinated.
And we have the ability to still compete. Unless there's updated guidance or they give us some latitude to do that.
Yeah, I think we follow the guidance across the board.
Okay. We at least have a better start now that we can talk from, and then develop. We'll modify our current plan to start incorporating all of it.
Right.
And bring that to you. If I can, I'll try to get it to you by next week or the 1st, as soon as I can.
Okay, we have more on our agenda. Right.
After the agenda, I just need the board to go into executive session to discuss personnel matters.
Sorry, I'm locked up here. Okay, so next up on the agenda, we have several items for action under finance. And my computer is locked. Right, there we go. We have 5.02 through 5.03. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
5.02 to 5.05, sorry. We have a motion, can I have a second? Any comments or discussion on those items? Warren?
I'm just curious, there's a whole section on beta testing. Are we participating?
5.03?
Isn't it 5.02, the mastery manager?
Good.
So there's a whole section on beta testing. And I'm just curious, are we participating in the beta testing or not?
So we are buying the deluxe version, I believe, of that program. If you're not familiar with it, it's the Think of Scantron. Remember Scantrons back in the day? This is the jacked up version of that. We primarily use it for that purpose, for teachers to use it for their test taking and for the purposes of getting data and analytics of the tests that they give. And the secondary purpose we've used it for is for surveying in the past. Before SurveyMonkey was around, we used this back in 2010, 11, 12. In that time period, it was brought on board to do surveying with our, but we've not used it for any other purpose as of right now.
Yeah, all right.
The beta testing, no, we haven't used it for that purpose.
Okay, because in the contract, it says if you're beta testing, then it has a whole bunch of parameters, and I was curious, because it sounded like a lot of extra work for the participants, so I was wondering if we were part of it.
What was important for me is just to describe what exactly we do use it for and how it is used, so there's a context, and then there are other parts that we could use in the future, but it's not the intent right now. Those are the two main focuses that we've used it for, teacher use and for surveying information.
Okay, so we're not in their beta test group?
No.
Okay.
And it should have actually, that's a good point. I did not talk to Bill about that. That probably should have been stricken if that's not part of what we're agreeing to. So I don't know if we want to pull that, Tom, and get that stricken, or do we want to move forward with the understanding we're not using that aspect?
I will leave that to your best judgment.
Oh, that's very clear. Thanks. If the board is comfortable with the understanding that we're not being beta tested, then I'm fine with that. And that's the understanding of our contract, that we are not being used for that purpose. Does that make sense?
I just wanted to make sure, because the beta portion seemed like it says it might fail and we have to provide backups, and seemed like a lot of extra work for a product that's not going to work.
To let you know, we are exploring other services to do the same work, more of an online fashion, given our move to paperless. As we explore another facet of this type of software, we might get into that aspect, but I can clarify with Bill, to my understanding, we're not being part of that. Yes.
The share is eliminated, which is why I'm bringing the contract with them directly to the district. The program itself is not new to the district.
Yeah. In essence, Warren, we're being forced to do this now because BOCES will no longer service it.
Okay. I'm fine with it. I just wanted to make sure we weren't part of the beta. That was the whole emphasis I had, because it said it would fail and you needed backups.
Any? Oh, sorry.
I had a question about the same contract. Is there student, teacher, or principal personally identifiable information going to be provided to Gold Star under this contract?
That first part, you said principal or student teacher?
Yeah.
Personal identification?
Mm-hmm.
Teachers are assigned an ID code to use to be able to scan and get their analytics. No student data is given, say, by numbers or, a number participant. To my knowledge, there's nothing specific except for an admin, who is usually Sean McDonough in our case, who facilitates this in conjunction with my office. So no, there wouldn't be any personal identifier, except for him as the admin. We do have to have an admin on site that has the access, and I too probably am listed as an admin to the program.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, all those in favor of 5.02 through 5.05, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Moving on to our personnel items for action, we only have the HR recommendations, 6.02. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay. Our miscellaneous items for action, we have 7.02 through 7.06. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions, or discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All right. Lastly, we have item 8, our board member comments. So I'll open it up if anybody has any additional comments for this evening. Doug?
We had some folks show up at the last board meeting. I was able to attend, ask about athletic trainer services. I don't know if I missed some information on that. Is there any update there?
Oh, no, Guthrie, and I'm hoping the person that was on the board at Guthrie is out there listening. We were notified by letter today, and honestly, I didn't take the person's call beforehand because honestly, I knew they were calling just to say, we're dumping you. They can service every other district, but for some reason, they've lost 4 or 5 candidates to service Horseheads. They're willing to have a further follow-up discussion, so I've asked Katie with our new athletic director to pursue that for a full-time contract, and that they need to represent us as a major district in the area like they've represented everybody else. We are in the discussion as well, and I don't have a problem having an extra if we can come to terms with Guthrie, and they can go out and hire one of the 5 people they've passed on. But that's their personnel decision. But Arnett will be able to service some of ours. We have to work out a contract. Katie will be doing that, as we were just made aware that for the most part, a lot of our afternoon events could be potentially serviced by them, but they're interested in helping us out. I will still ask Caitlin to still follow through on the civil service development of a position if they would ever seek to do that down the road. Currently, we cannot, and then we may still have to pursue the nurse practitioner route as well. But it looks like we will either have a trainer or I will have an ambulance for high contact sports on premises.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments? Okay. So motion to adjourn to our executive session.
No action to be taken afterwards as for an individual personnel item or individuals personnel item, just a discussion of the board to give me some guidance.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you. Are we staying
I'm
here?
checking. Well, you can stay right in here once everybody. This is not a bad personnel discussion, at least.
Good.